The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, and Noah Reed stepped into the 32nd floor of Grant Tech Innovations. The carpet absorbed his footsteps, leaving no trace but the faint scent of new fabric and coffee from the morning staff meeting. Outside, the city pulsed, horns, glass, sunlight. But here, everything was glass and silence. Evelyn Grant looked up from her desk when he entered. She didn't rise. She rarely did. At 59, the founder and CEO had learned that power didn't require motion, it required stillness. Her eyes, cool gray and steady, studied him the way an artist studies a blank canvas. Curious, cautious, unwilling to reveal interest too soon, he introduced himself simply. No charm, no stammer, just a soft voice and a firm handshake that lingered one heartbeat longer than expected. She noticed that. She also noticed he carried no notebook, no tablet, only a single pen clipped to his jacket pocket. "I remember things better when I write them down later," he said, almost apologetically. The others in the conference room whispered after he left. "Another rookie," they murmured. "A trial hire to look progressive." Evelyn heard them but said nothing. She watched the door close behind him and felt something she hadn't in years, curiosity. That afternoon, she caught a glimpse of him through the glass wall of the open workspace. He listened more than he spoke, nodding when others dismissed his ideas, scribbling notes on scraps of paper instead of challenging them. Yet when he finally did speak, the room stilled. His voice was low, thoughtful. "Maybe what the numbers are showing isn't failure," he said. "Maybe it's fatigue. Even systems get tired." A few heads turned, even hers. She smiled privately, the faintest curve of lips she hadn't used in months. There was something about him, an echo of patience, a steadiness that reminded her of another era when effort mattered more than noise. When the day ended, Noah Reed was still there, erasing his whiteboard before leaving. He straightened the chairs he hadn't used and turned off the light. From her doorway, Evelyn watched the darkness reclaim the room and wondered, not for the first time that year, whether youth had finally returned to teach her something age could not. The first rain of April brushed against the windows of Evelyn Grant's office, soft enough to sound like memory. She stood by the glass watching the city turn silver when Noah Reed's reflection appeared behind her. Hesitant, respectful. "Come in," she said without turning. He did. He carried a folder, thick with reports she hadn't requested. "I ran through the quarterly retention data," he said. "There's a pattern. Small, but it matters." She gestured to the table. He spoke in measured sentences, tracing trends with his finger across the paper. His observations were quiet revolutions, simple truths no one else had seen because they were too loud to notice. He didn't sell his ideas. He offered them, like gifts he wasn't sure she wanted. When he finished, there was silence, the kind that measures respect before approval. Evelyn finally nodded. "Send this to Marcia, and next time, don't apologize for being right." He looked startled, then smiled, just enough to soften the room. Over the following weeks, the air between them changed. She began to ask for his input during executive reviews. He began to stay late, not because he had to, but because she did. Sometimes their conversations drifted beyond work, to music, to the loneliness of leadership, to the cost of ambition. Once, as midnight hummed through the building, he said quietly, "You built this place like a cathedral, Miss Grant. People forget cathedrals aren't about walls. They're about the echoes." That line stayed with her. The next morning, she found herself repeating it under her breath while signing reports. The staff noticed her lighter mood, but no one dared name it. By summer, whispers had started. The rookie and the CEO. Late nights, closed-door meetings. Some said mentorship. Others said something else. Evelyn ignored them publicly, but privately, the rumors gnawed at the fragile trust she was beginning to feel. Still, when she passed his desk one evening and found a handwritten note beside a stack of corrected budgets. "For tomorrow's presentation, I think this will help." She felt the smallest tug at her heart. She slid the paper into her pocket without reading it then, saving it like a keepsake from a future she didn't yet understand. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something else had quietly begun. By May, Grant Tech's offices carried the warmth of long afternoons and the quiet hum of purpose. Evelyn Grant's days followed the rhythm she had shaped over decades. Meetings, calls, signatures. But now, there was something different threading through her routine. The awareness of Noah Reed. He wasn't loud, and that was what made people notice him. In rooms filled with chatter, he waited for silence before he spoke. In conversations about data, he found stories about people. His mind connected dots that others didn't even see. One morning, Evelyn caught herself reading one of his reports twice. Not for errors, but for the way his words carried weight without force. He had written, "Retention isn't loyalty, it's belonging. And belonging begins with being seen." She lingered on that line, fingers brushing the edge of the paper like it might speak if she held it long enough. Later that week, the company's senior leadership gathered for a review. Marcia Linwood, her longtime COO, noticed the small glances that passed between the CEO and her new strategist. They weren't romantic, not yet. They were curious, patient, almost cautious. But in an office where perception mattered more than truth, that was enough to start speculation. During the meeting, Derek Vaughan smirked when Noah offered a suggestion. "Interesting," he said, "coming from someone who's never run a department." The comment drew a few nervous laughs. Evelyn didn't join them. She simply leaned forward, her tone even but unmistakable. "And yet, he's the only one who noticed the decline before you did." The room fell quiet. Derek shifted in his seat. Noah didn't look triumphant. He looked startled, even humbled. When the meeting ended, he thanked her quietly. She just nodded, her gaze steady. That night, when everyone else had gone, she walked past his office and saw the lights still on. He was there again, same calm posture, same quiet focus. On his desk lay a photo of a younger version of himself with an older woman. Maybe a foster mother, she guessed, or someone who had once believed in him the way she now found herself doing. Evelyn stood there a moment longer than she should have, before turning off the hallway light. She didn't realize she'd smiled, and for the first time in years, she went home without the usual ache of loneliness that came after a day of command. June arrived with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and boardroom tension. Grant Tech was preparing for a major contract renewal with a government client, one that could decide the company's future. Evelyn Grant had entrusted Noah Reed with part of the proposal. Not all, just enough to test his insight and perhaps her own faith. He worked quietly, staying late again, crafting models, refining words, checking figures twice. But in the polished corridors of ambition, trust rarely travels alone. Derek Vaughan noticed the trust Evelyn was giving him and decided to test it. It began small. A document misplaced, a deadline subtly moved, numbers accidentally altered before a presentation. When the board met, the results seemed off. The projections looked careless, even risky. Derek leaned back, feigning concern. "I warned we were moving too fast with the rookie," he said. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She looked at Noah, who sat straight, eyes steady, even under pressure. "I double-checked those numbers last night," he said softly. "They were correct." The room filled with murmurs. Derek shrugged, as if regretful. "Then maybe you didn't double-check enough." For the first time since he'd joined, Evelyn felt the sting of doubt. Not in his skill, but in her own judgment. She didn't defend him. She simply adjourned the meeting and asked everyone to leave the files on her desk. Noah stayed behind a moment longer. "If you need me to rework everything tonight, I will," he said quietly. She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes weren't pleading, they were calm, honest. "Go home, Noah," she said. "I'll handle it." He nodded once and left. That night, long after the city lights had dimmed, Evelyn reopened the data files. Within minutes, she saw it. The pattern didn't match his style. The errors were deliberate, almost too perfect. She leaned back, realization sinking in. Someone had tried to frame him. The next morning, she arrived early. Noah was already there, typing, unaware that she knew. She watched him for a long time before saying softly, "You were right." He turned, confused. She smiled faintly. About the numbers. About everything. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest she'd come to one in years. Outside, thunder rolled distantly. Inside, something fragile yet powerful settled between them. Trust rebuilt, quiet and unspoken. By July, the office air felt heavier, not from heat, but from rumors. Whispers traveled faster than memos. People lowered their voices when Evelyn Grant passed by, only to raise them again when she turned the corner. It wasn't the project anymore. It was her and him, the CEO and the rookie. The story everyone thought they understood but never saw. Evelyn noticed the sideways glances, the unfinished sentences when she entered a room. Even Marcia Linwood, her trusted lieutenant, began to ask questions disguised as concern. "He's bright," Marcia said one afternoon, "but too close to you. People are talking." Evelyn didn't answer. She kept her pen moving, signing a contract she barely read. But the truth was, the words sank deep. They always did when spoken from loyalty. That evening, as the sky turned copper over the city, she found Noah Reed in the break room, sleeves rolled up, coffee cup in hand, reviewing notes under the dim light. "Do you hear them?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled. "Hear who?" "The people," she said. "The ones who think they know more than they do." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "I hear them, but I also hear results, Miss Grant, and those speak louder." It was the kind of line she might have once said herself, back when ambition was her only companion. It almost made her smile. Still, later that night, she sat alone in her office and looked at the glass walls around her. They had once symbolized transparency. Now they felt like windows for judgment. She opened her drawer and found the note he'd written months ago, the one she'd kept folded in her wallet. She hadn't realized how worn the edges had become. The words were simple. "For tomorrow's presentation, I think this will help." She ran her fingers across the ink, remembering the steadiness in his tone, the quiet integrity that came from somewhere unteachable. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn Grant felt something she couldn't define. Part admiration, part fear. Because admiration could be controlled. But fear meant something inside her had begun to move. August came roaring with rain and thunder, the kind that paints the skyline gray and makes every glass window tremble. Evelyn Grant stayed late that evening, as usual. But this time, so did Noah Reed. The storm had cut power to half the city, leaving only the backup lights glowing across the office floors. He appeared at her doorway, holding a flashlight. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Neither should you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we're both here." They shared a quiet laugh that dissolved into the sound of rain. Then came silence. Comfortable, steady. He placed the flashlight on her desk and began sorting through scattered papers, helping without being asked. The beam of light caught the silver strands in her hair, and for a brief moment, she looked years younger, like a woman remembering her own beginning. As lightning flashed across the window, she said quietly, "You remind me of someone I used to be." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at her, eyes soft but unwavering. Then maybe she's still there. Those words hit deeper than he could have known. For a long time, they worked side by side, saying nothing. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the air felt calm, almost sacred. When the thunder finally eased, he turned to leave. "Good night, Miss Grant," he said, his voice low. She stopped him with one question. "Why do you stay?" He turned back, his silhouette framed by the doorway. "Because you believed in me before anyone else did. I don't walk away from that." The door closed gently, leaving her in the dim hum of the generator and the echo of his words. She sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from her. The rain had stopped, but inside her, something was beginning, a reckoning, slow and quiet, like the moment before dawn. Evelyn Grant realized that what she felt for Noah Reed wasn't simple admiration anymore. It was something she couldn't categorize in corporate terms. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in decades, and for the first time since her husband's passing, she wasn't afraid of it. The days after the storm carried a strange clarity. The air seemed cleaner, the mornings quieter. Yet between Evelyn Grant and Noah Reed, something had shifted. Not broken, not spoken, but undeniably changed. He still reported to her office for reviews. He still took notes in that same careful handwriting. But now, the silence between their words carried something neither dared name. Marcia Linwood began watching more closely. She wasn't unkind, she was protective. Of Evelyn's reputation, the company, the image that had taken decades to build. "People are starting to assume things," she warned one afternoon. "They don't need reasons, just patterns." Evelyn looked up from her desk. "Then let them assume. Patterns can be wrong." But that night, she stayed later than usual, staring at her reflection in the window. The faint outline of a woman who had once been fearless and now felt the quiet ache of caution. Downstairs, the janitorial crew had already finished. The building was nearly empty when Noah appeared at her door again, carrying a stack of revised reports. "I wanted you to see these before tomorrow's board session," he said. She gestured for him to set them down. He did, but lingered a moment. "You haven't been sleeping," he said softly. "Your light's been on every night this week." Her lips curved in a tired smile. "You watched too closely." "Only because you taught me to," he replied. For a heartbeat, the air stood still. Two people at different ends of life's timeline, bound by something that didn't obey office hierarchies or gossip. Then she turned away, breaking the silence. "Good night, Mr. Reed." He hesitated, nodded once, and left. The moment passed, but the distance it left behind wasn't empty. It was full of restraint, of memory, of questions that would never fit neatly in an email or meeting agenda. That night, Evelyn sat alone under the soft hum of the ceiling lights and whispered to no one, "I'm not supposed to feel this way again." But feelings, she realized, don't ask permission. They arrive uninvited and stay, quietly, insistently, like hope in an old heart rediscovering its pulse. September brought tension like autumn wind, subtle but cutting. The quarterly review was approaching, and Grant Tech stood at a crossroads. Investors wanted expansion, faster profit, newer blood. The same voices that once praised Evelyn Grant now whispered she was too cautious, too traditional, too attached. On the morning of the board meeting, Evelyn entered the glass-walled conference room, every step measured, her reputation preceding her like a shadow. Noah Reed sat 2 seats away, calm but unreadable. Derek Vaughn started the session with the confidence of a man rehearsing a takedown. "With all due respect," he said, flipping through charts, "our current strategy lacks innovation. We need leadership that's in step with the next generation." His tone was polite, but the target was clear. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Innovation doesn't mean impatience, Mr. Vaughn. But it does mean vision," he countered smoothly. "And perhaps vision should come from those who still see the horizon." A few chuckles followed. Noah's jaw tightened. He glanced at her, as if silently asking permission to speak, but she gave none. This was her battlefield. The presentation dragged on. Numbers, graphs, egos. When it was Noah's turn to speak, he rose slowly. "I joined this company 6 months ago," he began, "and I've seen 2 things, discipline and fear. One builds foundations, the other builds cages. If we lose her," he nodded toward Evelyn, "we lose the balance that built this company in the first place." The room went still. Derek scoffed. "So now the rookie lectures us on balance?" Noah met his gaze. "No, I'm just reminding you that storms don't sink ships, captains do." Even Marcia couldn't hide a flicker of pride. Evelyn said nothing, but her eyes softened, the faintest glint of something unspoken. The meeting ended without applause, without resolution. But that night, an email went out from her office, brief and final. "Effective immediately, Derek Vaughn is relieved of his duties pending review." It was bold, controversial, risky. When Noah saw it the next morning, he said nothing, only stopped by her office door, nodded once in silent acknowledgement, and left. Evelyn watched him go, her heart steady but alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Power, she realized, could be lonely. But sometimes, just sometimes, it could also be shared. October carried the scent of change. Cold mornings, darker evenings, and the quiet realization that some things could never return to how they were. Evelyn Grant moved through the office with her usual composure, but beneath that calm was fatigue, a kind that no amount of coffee or silence could cure. The board's pressure hadn't eased after Derek Vaughn's dismissal. If anything, it had grown sharper. "You're protecting him," they said in subtle tones. "The young strategist, he's clouding your judgment." She didn't respond to accusations anymore. She'd learned that silence was sometimes the only defense dignity allowed. But late one night, she found Noah Reed in the empty conference room, surrounded by notes, budget drafts, and a flickering desk lamp. He looked up when she entered, exhaustion shadowing his usually bright eyes. "You should be home," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "You should be too." She walked closer, scanning the papers. "What are you trying to save this time?" "Us," he said without hesitation. The word hung there, raw and unguarded. He didn't mean them, not romantically, not even personally. He meant the company, the dream, the shared purpose that had tied 2 very different lives together. But still, something in her chest stirred at the sound. "You've done enough," she murmured. "I haven't," he replied. "You gave me your trust when I was no one. Let me earn it all the way." She wanted to argue. Instead, she just sat down beside him, the chair creaking softly in the quiet. For the first time in months, they spoke freely. Not about contracts or deadlines, but about what had brought them here. He told her about growing up in foster care, about watching mentors leave when he needed them most. "I promised myself," he said, "that when I found someone worth learning from, I wouldn't leave first." The confession left the room still. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had led hundreds, inspired thousands, but no one had ever said those words to her. When she finally stood to leave, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't lose yourself trying to save me, Noah." He looked up, eyes steady. "Maybe saving you is the only way I'll ever find myself." She walked out before he could see the emotion that broke through her composure. a tremor she hadn't felt in decades. Outside, rain began to fall again. It always seemed to when something inside her changed. The first frost of November clung to the windows the morning the headlines hit. Grant Tech faces shareholder revolt. Evelyn Grant stood in her office, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. She'd weathered scandals before. Mergers gone wrong, contracts lost, markets that turned overnight. But this was different. This one felt personal. Her phone rang constantly. Messages piled up. Advisors wanted statements. Lawyers wanted time. But time, it seemed, had finally run out. By noon, the board called an emergency meeting. Noah Reed was there before she arrived, a calm presence amid chaos. He greeted her with a nod that said, "I'm here. Whatever this is, we'll face it." The meeting was brutal. Accusations of favoritism, questions about leadership succession, and under it all, an unspoken motive. They wanted her gone. Evelyn listened in silence. When it was finally her turn to speak, her voice was steady. "If you believe this company needs new leadership, say it. Don't hide behind excuses." No one spoke until Noah did. He rose, calm and deliberate. "If the problem is perception," he said, "then I'll fix it." She turned sharply toward him. "Noah?" But he continued. "I'll resign effective immediately. You'll have your distance. Your integrity stays intact. And maybe in time, people will remember what really matters, the work." The room froze, Evelyn's heart clenched in disbelief. "You can't do that," she said softly. He met her gaze. "I already did." He slid a single envelope across the table, his resignation, and walked out before anyone could stop him. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have. The rest of the meeting blurred. Voices, papers, formalities, none of it reached her. All she could see was that empty chair, the one he'd filled with so much quiet courage. When the meeting ended, she sat alone, staring out at the city that glittered cold beneath the first snow. He had done the one thing she never expected. Not out of ambition, not out of pride, but out of loyalty, the kind that cost more than applause could ever repay. And in that moment, Evelyn Grant realized that maybe love wasn't always declared. Sometimes it simply walked away, leaving peace where chaos used to live. December arrived draped with subtle Christmas decorations, garlands, soft gold ribbons, a tree in the lobby that blinked half-heartedly against the early dusk. But inside Evelyn Grant's office, there were no lights. Just the still hum of the heater and the empty desk across from her. The one that used to belong to Noah Reed. He was gone. For real this time. His resignation had been processed, his name removed from the directory, his keycard deactivated. And yet traces of him remained. In the organized files, the scent of coffee he preferred, the precision of his reports still used in meetings. He had left quietly, as he had lived, with grace that left others to fill the silence. The company began to stabilize again. Investors stopped calling. The board retreated to their numbers and meetings. Everything was functioning. Perfectly, predictably. And yet, for Evelyn, the predictability felt like grief. She caught herself more than once pausing before sending an email, wondering what Noah would have said, how he would have phrased a thought, what gentle correction he would have offered. She missed not just his ideas, but his presence. Marcia noticed the change but said nothing until one evening. "You did what you had to," she said softly. He knew that. Evelyn nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "He deserved better," she whispered. After Marcia left, Evelyn opened her desk drawer, the one where she kept a single folded note she'd never shown anyone. It was from Noah, slipped under her door on his last day. She hadn't read it yet. She wasn't ready then. Tonight, she was. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it. "Miss Grant, I used to think strength meant winning alone. You showed me that real strength is carrying others even when it hurts. If you're reading this, I hope the company's still standing tall, because that means you are too. Don't look for me. Just look forward. That's what you taught me." Beneath the words was a small sketch, a sunrise. Simple, almost childlike. She stared at it for a long time, then leaned back in her chair, eyes glistening. Outside, the city lights flickered in soft reflection. Inside, a tear traced a quiet line down her cheek, not of sadness but of something gentler, gratitude. It was the last day of the year when Evelyn Grant finally stood before the board for what would be her final announcement. She looked composed, as always, but the calm in her eyes was different now. Not the shield of authority, the peace of understanding. "I've decided," she began, "that this will be my last quarter as CEO." The room murmured. Marcia's eyes widened. No one had expected this. Evelyn continued, voice steady. I've spent 30 years building Grant Tech. It's time for it to belong to the next generation, not by age, but by courage." When the meeting ended, reporters asked questions she didn't answer. Instead, she returned to her office, closing the door gently behind her. On her desk waited the same envelope she'd kept all these months, the one marked to Evelyn Grant. Inside was Noah Reed's final letter. She had read it once before, but tonight she unfolded it again, tracing every line as if seeing it new. "When I started here, you were the standard I measured myself against. Now I realize you were the compass, pointing true north when I lost mine. Whatever you do next, do it for the same reason you believed in me, because someone out there still needs to be seen." She smiled, a slow, quiet smile that carried both ache and warmth. Then she stood, opened the blinds, and looked out at the winter skyline. The city shimmered in pale gold light, snow catching on the glass towers that bore her company's name. Grant Tech would go on. The world would move forward, and she, Evelyn Grant, would finally rest knowing she hadn't just built a business. She had passed on something far rarer: faith in those who came after. That evening, as she walked out of the building for the last time, she paused by the empty lobby, where a new portrait had just been hung. Beneath her photo was a bronze plaque with the inscription, "Leadership is not the power to command, but the courage to believe." She touched it once, then turned toward the cold evening air. Outside, the streetlights glowed against the falling snow. A man passed by, young, confident, carrying a briefcase that reminded her of a familiar one. For a heartbeat, she thought it was him. Then she smiled. It didn't matter. The world was full of rookies who would one day surprise everyone. And as Evelyn Grant stepped into the quiet night, her reflection caught faintly in the glass doors behind her. A woman at peace, finally ready to let go. The city exhaled with her. Sometimes, life doesn't give us grand endings. It gives us letters left on desks, unfinished sentences, and people who walk away. Not because they stopped caring, but because they cared enough to leave the space for growth. Evelyn Grant thought she was teaching Noah Reed about leadership, but in truth, he was teaching her something far rarer: the courage to trust again. It's strange how the quietest moments reveal the loudest truths. A folded note, an empty chair, a name that still echoes when the lights go out. Maybe that's how we know someone mattered, when their absence still feels like guidance. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Evelyn Grant's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Noah Reed's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next. Because here at Fiction Echoes, every story leaves something behind. A truth, a tear, or maybe just a little more faith in people than before.